I call it the invisible load. We're
Mm.
carrying things that people don't see. I think quite naturally because we're the ones who, take care of the kids, or we're typically the caregivers in our communities and in our villages and families. We're thinking about, and I even see this with women in the workplace. We're always thinking about how are people feeling when we're in meetings, for example. We're looking in the room and we're like, okay, what's the temperature in this room? Do I need to turn it up? Do I need to turn it down? Who do I need to talk to when this meeting is over? Because I noticed something that was going on. So you're having to hold the agenda. Here are the things that we have to do. And then you're also holding space and managing space, time, and intangibles to make sure that everybody's okay. And that could also look like I'm in the meeting right now, but I know my kid has to go to soccer practice and I can't make it, and I got to get on the phone and see who I can get to pick them up. It's just a lot of things that we don't necessarily talk about, that we're thinking about and are concerned with, that we're navigating while also leading organizations and leading teams every day.
Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to Unapologetically 50 Plus. My name is Angela. If you're a woman over 45 who has built a successful career, but something inside you feels off, this conversation's for you. On paper, your life may look solid, but internally, something feels misaligned. And it's not because you did anything wrong, but because the woman you are today may not fully fit the life you built years ago. Today, we are talking about why so many high achieving women reach this point in midlife and what it means when success no longer feels like enough. Today, my guest is Danielle Jackson, an executive coach, strategist, and founder of Empower Vision Group. She helps high achieving women move from endurance to intentional living. But before I bring her on, I have one huge favor to ask. If you find any value or enjoy the content, please remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Your engagement really helps build this channel. So thank you. I truly appreciate your support. All right, let's bring on Danielle and let's get this conversation started. Hey Danielle, how you doing today, love?
I'm doing great, Angela. Excited to be here with you today.
Well, so thank you so much for being here with me today. But before we dive in, please tell folks a little bit more about you and the work that you do.
Absolutely. I call myself a designer and architect now. And because really what my life's mission has become is really to support women who have arrived at a station in their lives where they've accomplished a lot, they feel successful, and there is something underneath that is calling their name that says, I want more. So I serve women, professional women who have experienced success but are ready to design a life that matches the woman that they have become, not who they used to be.
Sounds good. Now, when you say professional success, are you talking
Yeah.
about a dollar figure or just what they've done
Mhm.
in their life,
I
in
think
their
that's a great
success?
question. I'll be candid with you. What I'm really describing is you've risen to a level of leadership and influence that you have been responsible for a great deal of work, be it people or be it programming, but you have held responsibility and authority for a period of time.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. All right,
Mhm.
all right. So many women reach midlife with, like you said, decades of experience, yet they
Sure.
still question their authority or leadership. Why do you think that happens?
Well, before I went into executive coaching full time, I served as a superintendent of a large charter school in Detroit. And I can tell you firsthand and from the women that I know in the work that we're strivers. Often women are raised to be go-getters. You're never satisfied, but you're also, searching for perfection. And so I think um, one of the reasons why women may question their authority is because we just don't know when enough is good enough. And we're always thinking about what is that next thing that we're either being held to or we see ourselves as being responsible for. And there is no real end game,
Okay.
because that end game is how do we strive and perfect what it is that we're trying to do in the world.
So that seems like it's coming more from internal doubt rather than external messaging.
Absolutely, because here's the truth as I see it, and I'll be the first to say that this is my opinion. But we have, as women, particularly as Black women, we can't show what our concerns are or what our worries may be.
Hmm.
You have to be polished. I called it, I
Right,
put on my cape every morning to go to work. And
right.
I'm in a place in my life now where I want to take that cape off and be my authentic self. So there is this internal voice in your head that's saying, is this good enough? Am I showing up the way that I need to? What do people expect from me? How might I be falling short? Or where do I need to, stretch myself? Because our internal barometer is never satisfied,
Mm,
because we're always in this space of, I've got to present myself as being this polished,
right,
well-spoken. I know what I know, what I know,
right,
and there isn't a lot of room for error. It feels that way.
right. So have
Mhm.
you seen women shift out of that mindset once they recognize it?
It takes some help, and I'll be the first to admit it. The things that I coach women about are many of them I've experienced myself. It takes that. I talk about this quiet whisper,
Mhm.
that or this thing that keeps coming up. I name it friction. There comes a point in our career where we start to say, okay, there's the climb. I get to a plateau, and there's nothing but another mountain that's in
Mm,
front of me. And so, when do the mountains stop? And
right.
here's the truth that no one really wants us to know. You can. I remember when my husband passed away suddenly,
Mm,
and I was in the room with my coach. I had been working with a coach for a number of years. And I said, I'm so afraid to sit down because if I sit down, I won't get back up.
wow.
And I had this palpable feeling of, I've got to stop. I have to just stop
Yeah.
and listen to what my body is saying, listen to what my spirit is saying, listen to what my intellect is saying. And the truth of the matter is, successful women always get back up. But
Right.
what I'm offering up here is it is important for us to stop, take a moment, sit down,
Mm,
and give ourselves some breathing room to say, is this a mountain I still want to climb?
mm. I like
Or
that.
do I want to do something else?
I like that. I really do. That's something we
Mhm.
really, we don't think about enough. So I like the way you phrase that.
Yeah.
So you talk about the importance of leaders having space to reflect. Why
Yes.
is that so important, and why do so many leaders operate without that?
I think our country is built on productivity. And so we have a productivity culture. And so I read somewhere once, I'm not sure where I got this from, but a leader's work is sometimes looking out the window and just thinking.
Hmm.
Because when you reach a level of responsibility where strategy is something that you have to think about, you can't turn. I remember working with my coach and we were talking about, when I was in the classroom, I'll use this as an example. When I was in the classroom, I could turn on a dime if a student says, a student answered a question in a certain way. I could turn on a dime like being in a rowboat and move the conversation in another direction. But then I started leading my grade level team and I could still turn on a dime, but it took just a little bit longer. Well,
Right.
we went through that analogy and now here I was, the chief academic officer, and he said, now you're turning the Titanic.
Mm,
That is a very different proposition than turning a rowboat. And
wow.
so imagine when you are having to think about steering a ship of that size to a different destination because you've gotten some intelligence that says that where we were going isn't really the right way. You have to take the time to think.
Okay.
You have to think about who needs to be in the room to be having these conversations with me? What
Mm.
are the ways we're going to measure success when it's going to take us longer than we imagined to get to where we need it to be? We're going to need to have some short-term performance indicators as well as long-term. And you don't get to those high-level solutions by being quick on the draw. You have to step back and say, okay, what is the next right thing to do in this moment?
So what happens when leaders never, and we know we're talking primarily about women when I say leaders in this
Correct. Yeah.
conversation. What
Mhm.
happens when leaders never create that space for themselves?
Yeah, I think anxiety starts to build because you're just like going, going, going. There becomes this false sense of having to have the answer right away
Hmm.
versus, sequestering that time that you need to look at all the information that's in front of you
Yeah,
to be able to make that choice. And I think there's this feeling of, can I stop? Can I stop? Can
right,
I take a moment away from it all and not be perceived as lazy, not being perceived as, maybe she doesn't know what she doesn't know.
right.
There's always this perception of readiness that I think women carry. And I'm here to say it's not about that life anymore.
Right.
We
Especially,
deserve, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially when you hit a certain age range, you're like, you know
Yes,
what?
ma'am. Yes.
I'm done.
Yes.
I'm done with all
That's
this,
right.
all this hustle and trying to, make sure folks know that I'm capable and the one thing that you just said, which really always cracks me up, is the audacity when people call, especially women in midlife, call us lazy. That always just
Yes.
like, or using that perception like you were using as an example. It's like we're
Yes.
far from that. Matter of fact, we
Mhm.
need to pull back and be a little more, I'm not going to use the word lazy, but more, being able to relax a little more and let things go. So,
100%. We don't have to live in the fifth gear all the time.
right, right.
Mhm.
So, what is one simple way a leader can start building that habit of
What
creating
I'm
that space?
encouraging, great question. I'm encouraging women to create space, one, by just listening. I think we're intuitive people
Yes,
by nature. But when you're moving, 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 you cannot hear. So sequestering time to just be and see what comes up. I'm an avid journaler. I believe in it. And I'm not talking, you gotta journal for 5 hours a day.
right,
But that quiet time when you're just writing down your thoughts, you start to see patterns over time
right,
if you create that space. It could be 5 minutes. There's apps on our cell phone now that we can use that you can do a voice note. If you're not a writer, do a voice note.
right,
You can listen back to it. If you like to garden, spend some time in your garden. But the
right,
point is, find some time with stillness.
right.
And what I believe is that in that stillness, it will come. Now, what I also see, and I have to say this, what I also see is that it becomes those life-changing moments that makes us stop. That was true of me. I'm going to raise
Yes.
my hand.
Yeah.
I was journaling, but it wasn't until, I was in the hospital room having to
Mm,
make a choice about life support for
yeah.
my husband that I realized that life isn't going to wait on me to wait
Right.
on me,
Right.
right? And so I can say, because I had no choice, I had to stop and start to listen because my body couldn't really do anything different.
Mm,
So I'm out here preaching to women like, let's not wait for the life-changing moment to happen.
right.
When we start to feel that tightness in our chest or that irritation that you just can't put your finger on,
Mm,
that's your intuition's way of saying, hey, pay attention. I'm trying to tell you something if you're willing to
exactly.
listen. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I will have to say one thing when you're talking about the journaling, I call it brain dumping because sometimes it's just me writing down words. It doesn't
Yes.
even have to be full sentences. But
Yes.
I mean, I know a lot of folks rather use their phone or whatnot. But I also think putting pen or pencil to paper really opens up a lot more than just talking on the phone. I mean, you're going to do whatever's best for you, and I
Mhm.
encourage that. But something about putting pencil or pen to paper actually really is more cathartic than,
Yes.
talking on the phone. But, but again, you've got to do whatever works best for you in that moment. Because it might be you don't have pen and paper, you might be driving. You're like, okay, I need a brain dump as you're
Yes.
driving. So do whatever's best for you. But also sometimes go to that pen and paper, that old fashioned way of
Yes.
getting things out of your head.
Yes. I agree with you 100%.
I keep one by my bed because sometimes at night I'll wake up and I'm like going, I need to get this off and I get this off my mind. And because I'll know by the morning time I have forgotten. So,
Yeah, because we're as humans, we're energetic people.
right,
And so there's something about when our energy is off, you kind of feel like, and then you take that journal out and you start writing. There are times that I'm dumping I'm dumping so
right,
fast. I can't even keep up writing on the paper because I'm going so fast.
right.
But to be able to go back and look at it, I also think that it really captures what you've conquered. I go back and look at some of the things that I wrote down. I've been journaling since probably 96-ish or so.
Oh,
And I
okay.
can go back and like, oh man, my writing is even calmer,
Yeah,
because I've really taken that time out and think of it as a treat to yourself
right.
that you get to hear yourself. Because I do think journaling is like having a conversation with you
Yeah, yeah.
when you don't have time to, do it regularly. Yeah.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. So, what is the biggest pressure you see women leaders carrying that most people around them don't see?
Yeah. I call it the invisible load. We're
Mm,
carrying things that people don't see. I think quite naturally because we're the ones who, take care of the kids, or we're typically the caregivers in our communities and in our villages and families. We're thinking about, and I even see this with women in the workplace. We're always thinking about how are people feeling when we're in meetings, for example. We're looking in the room and we're like, okay, what's the temperature in this room? Do I need to turn it up? Do I need to turn it down? Who do I need to talk to when this meeting is over? Because I noticed something that was going on. So you're having to hold the agenda. Here are the things that we have to do. And then you're also holding space and managing space, time, and intangibles to make sure that everybody's okay. And that could also look like I'm in the meeting right now, but I know my kid has to go to soccer practice and I can't make it, and I got to get on the phone and see who I can get to pick them up. It's just a lot of things that we don't necessarily talk about, that we're thinking about and are concerned with, that we're navigating while also leading organizations and leading teams every day.
now, do you think this issue is like you were saying in the meetings, we're thinking about, how people are feeling. Do we turn it up or do we tone it down? Do you think do you think that's women in general, or do you think mostly Black women have to really be cognizant of how we're leading meetings or how we're being perceived?
Yeah, I'm going to say I think I want to be careful because I'm not a male basher. So I want
Right,
to,
right,
I
right,
want to qualify
right.
that.
But we are talking
Um,
about women for
but we
women.
are
So,
talking about absolutely. I do think that we carry a certain level of empathic powers. I think it's our superpowers.
right.
We can sense things happening that we may need to attend to in ways that are not necessarily shared with our male counterparts. And I do believe that there is a tax that Black women pay because it's if we get upset in any way, it can be perceived as being the angry Black woman or being aggressive
Right,
in the workplace.
right.
And so I do think there is a level of pressure to be that much more controlled around what we're thinking and how we're emoting in the workplace, because it can be perceived in a way that's not factual. And then that follows you. That reputation starts to build and stories get told. So I think we do have to manage our composure and manage perception in a way that's uniquely different.
So, what tends to happen when the pressure goes unacknowledged for too long?
What can happen is burnout. I think that's the big one. And let me be clear, burnout can happen in a very, it's almost like if you think about a fire that starts in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see it,
Right.
but you know, like there's something going on. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it can look like that. There's this slow burn that starts to build for a woman who is just going, 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 and not really attending to the shifts and or the misalignment is what I like to call it. There's something happening in your life that you're just not aligned to anymore. Maybe you liked working 60 hours a week, and then taking care of the home, but you're a little tired.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say,
Right.
okay, I'll do 50. I'm not saying I want to go to part-time work, but I think I don't have to live in fifth gear anymore. And
Right.
so there's this slow burn that can start to happen, and it can affect your ability to focus. It can affect your ability to tolerate stress because we know in leadership, there is a certain amount of stress that comes along with those expectations. And it can become more and more difficult to manage that. And then you start to see cracks in your work product. Maybe you aren't as quick to get the report out, or maybe you're not as engaged as you might be.
Right.
And so I think that, again, there's these signs that start to happen, and then unfortunately, it can turn into, an episode that happens. You're in a meeting, somebody says something, somebody misses a deadline, and you lose your cool. And you're like, oh my God, who is this talking? I can't believe this is me.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraging women, let's pay attention to those small signs before we have to sacrifice what we've worked so hard to build in our life.
Okay. So many leaders appear successful from the
Mhm.
outside, but feel overwhelmed internally. What do you think is usually happening beneath the surface?
I think it's misalignment. That's what I call it. It's misalignment.
Okay.
I describe our early career as endurance, like we're just on adrenaline, like we
Right.
we have a goal, we're chasing a goal, we're climbing that ladder.
Right.
And then what gets it, there's a saying, what got you here won't get you there.
Okay.
So there comes a point when if you imagine you're going 100 miles an hour all the time, your body will keep that score. At some point, your body or your mind or your spirit will say, this is no longer working for me. And so what shows up is that, there's something under the surface that says the way I'm living is not aligned to who I've become in that process. Because as we're driving and as we're gaining momentum in our career, we're also evolving as a woman.
Mm. Yes.
We're
Yes.
starting to think more about what we want. You
Right.
start looking around saying, I'm making sure everybody else is okay, but I'm not okay.
Right.
Or I'm making sure everybody else is okay and I want to be okay too.
Right.
But the architecture of your life isn't really lending itself to that kind of inspection. And so that's where the space comes in, because you got to make space to say, okay, where am I misaligned? And
Mm.
how can I start to deal with that? Because maybe I've had a value change in my life. I used to value working 100 hours a week. Now I value vacation,
Right.
or now I value spending time with my friends. So
Right.
how do I start to make that shift so that I don't compromise where I believe I've grown to, but then I also expand these other parts of my life that matter to me.
So let me ask you this. The women that you work with, are they still in corporate America or maybe have their own business or have where are they in their career? Most of the women that you
So
work with.
yes, most of the women that I work with are still in their career, but they're
Oh,
at
okay.
this inflection point. Many of them, but it manifests in different ways. I'll give some examples, but many of them are examining their life in this current moment and they're recognizing a shift. And so one example is the client of mine who um, started to see her husband travels a lot. So she's with the kids a lot. They're getting into a lot of activities, but then she also has this really full career. And she found herself questioning, am I being the best version of a mom that I want to be? And
Okay.
so we dug into that and we talked about, okay, let's talk about how maybe taking care of yourself, putting that oxygen mask on yourself allows you to then show up for your kids differently. There's another client. Her story is she thought she was ready to retire. And so we started talking about, well, what does that next chapter look like for you?
Hmm.
And what's so interesting is we talked quite a bit about what it could look like. And then she ended up taking a new position. She ended up promoting into a new position. But
Okay.
she's like, but now I feel like when I'm ready, I can make that choice. So there's
Okay.
a level of preparedness that she feels. So now she can work, in this new capacity, but still know that that resting point of retirement is still right there waiting for her when she wants to take it. So I think what they have in common is that they're all still in they're all still in their professions, but they want to start making these micro moves, some major, you know,
Mhm.
to for the life to reflect this new place I find myself in right now.
Okay. So
Mhm.
back to what we were talking about. So how do you help leaders recognize what's really driving that feeling?
So I think the big thing we do as coaches is we create a container. So I create a container for my clients to really examine. So let's talk about where, there's an assessment that I lead women through, and we just talk about the different, call it the wheel of life. Let's take a look at all the slices of who you are, because a
Hmm.
lot of pieces make up who we are as women.
Right.
Where do you experience satisfaction? Where do you see opportunity? And so we dig into that opportunity to figure out, okay, now what do you want to do about that? The one client that comes to mind as we've been working together, she's like, I love my job, but I feel like I am not happy personally. Like there's
Mhm.
more I could be doing. And so we started digging into that. And what it looks like is her calendar. Like, how are you making time to go to different activities? What do you even like to do outside
Mhm.
of work? Because we can situate ourselves around work. And as we continued to work together, she discovered that there was something happening that was holding her back from fully investing in the life she's living right now. And so we began to examine that, set some goals, and I'm her accountability partner. Because what
Okay.
can easily happen, we slide back into what we know,
Right.
even when it's not good for us.
Right.
And so
Right.
as a coach, that container is I'm here to help to keep you focused on what you said is most important to you. I show up just for you
Hmm.
so that you can realize that shift that you want to experience in your life.
Okay. Okay. So do you
Yeah.
believe
Mhm.
leadership development is more about personal growth than professional?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I remember I got to a point in my career where I stopped reading about the sort of the industry that I was in, and I began to read more about leadership development. Because at the heart of it, leadership is 80% people and
Mhm.
20% the stuff that you do. Because as you move up the chain of command, you're working through people. You're
Mhm.
not the individual contributor churning out that project or
Right.
churning out that report, right? And so you do begin to, I like to describe it as the higher we go in position, the more exposed we are as a
Oh,
human.
okay.
And so developing that self-awareness, what am I bringing to the table that are my gifts and talents, but also what am I bringing to the table that's my shadow side or
Mhm.
that may be a risk for me because it all starts to show
Right.
when we're put in high stress situations, right? And so it's important to be developing yourself as a leader, which is really about sort of the softer skills we talk about. How are you managing your time? How do you interact with people? How do you create space for people to show up?
Right.
And you back up when you need to, you step forward when you need to. Those things are agnostic of industry, but it's more about who you are as a leader.
And do you think that sometimes leaders resist the personal side of growth?
Oh, 100%, because it's vulnerability.
Mm.
Like it's vulnerability. I mean, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. She talks exhaustively about this subject, but what we know is that it takes courage to look in the mirror and say, okay, there's some things about the way that I'm leading that I may need
Mhm.
to adjust if I want to bring out the best, in the people who report to me. And
Right.
that's not an easy spot to stand in, but I think it's a worthwhile one because if you get to results and you look back and it's just a trail of fire, I mean, you can't, you can't be you can't be happy and satisfied about
Right.
that. Now,
Right.
I'm not saying that, that there aren't going to be challenges that a team experiences, but I do believe that work can be both enjoyable, productive, and fun as much as you get to hit those marks of performance and success. I think both can be true if we do it right.
Okay. So, what internal shifts usually happen when a leader becomes more effective?
I think number one, one internal shift I would say is when you finally realize that everybody is doing the best that they can with what they know.
Hmm.
I've read quite a few biographies of high performing CEOs, and the one theme that runs across all of them is that I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it out. Sure, I've been able to produce at this level, but with each production comes a whole new set of questions that I'm asking myself. And so I stopped treating myself like I had to have all the answers.
Yeah.
And now I'm really thinking about what are the questions that I need to be asking the very smart and capable people I've assembled on my team to help me to answer to continue to move your performance targets forward. I think that's the biggest shift. I say
Okay.
the other shift, Angela, is um, you know, no one gets anywhere alone.
Right.
When you start to embrace that it takes a team to
Right.
get to where you're trying to go, and you begin to think about who needs to be at the table with me
Mm.
to be, strategizing, to progress monitor execution, you start to recognize that you get further together than you do trying to do it on your own. I think those are the two biggest ones that I would name.
So, what tends to change first, the mindset or the behavior?
I think it depends, sometimes you can behave your way into a mindset change because the
Okay.
conditions around you sort of force your behavior to be different. And this is where I think coaching, and I'm not saying this just because I'm an executive coach, but I've had the pleasure of working with coaches over my career. I still have one now. And I think as you bring challenges to the coaching conversation, that
Hmm.
feedback that you get invariably is about you as a leader. And
Okay.
it's a hard,
Okay.
it can be a hard, a hard pill to swallow. And so you're oftentimes talking about behaviors. And then you start to see a pattern that then leads to the mind shift. Because I think that it's hard to change a mind without evidence that it's necessary to do so.
Okay. I like that. I never thought of it that way, but yes,
Hmm.
that makes a lot of sense. You have to recognize it
Hmm.
before you're willing or can change it. Makes sense. Okay.
That's right.
So do you
That's
think
right.
women become stronger leaders in midlife? And if so, what shifts internally that makes that possible?
I do. I do think that we become stronger. I've been sharing, I don't care. You talk to any woman who is north of 60, you're going to hear some form of, I say what I feel now, right?
Yes.
I do
Yes.
what it is that I want to do. Now,
Right.
if you don't like it, that is none of my concern. There's just this
Right.
pride of like, I dress the way I want to dress. I carry myself the way I don't. I bet
Uh-oh. Think we
and I
lost
am
you.
now being
There you
authentically who I am.
go. Okay.
And I think that women in leadership as uh-oh, okay, you
You're
got it.
good.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
I think that as we get good, okay, as we get older, we start to again take those layers. I know it was true of me. Take those layers off and begin to model a level of authenticity that makes the work just go. Because when you're stuck in performative stance all the time, you're not willing to acknowledge error. You're not necessarily willing to listen to other perspectives and points of view. But as you mature and you begin to understand, let me let some other folks come in here and lift this rock up with me.
Right.
I just think that when we get to that place of authenticity, when we want to just show up as ourselves uniquely, we begin to create more space for
Mhm.
others to step forward. We don't take on the cognitive load that doesn't belong to us, and therefore we have the energy and enthusiasm to be able to approach it. But I will be remiss if I didn't say that that comes through the work of because what is it going to cost me to take the mask off? And I think that we all have to do that work.
Yeah.
And once we get there, our teams are so much better for it.
Okay. And how does that lived experience shape the way, the way women lead, our lived experiences? For those
Yes,
of us who are still working in corporate America, or
that's right.
even if it's, just, out here like us coaching, how does our
Mhm.
lived experience shape the way we lead?
I will say before I step down from my role to pursue coaching full time, it's about giving back. There's a lot of evidence that's out there about the importance of sponsorship for women.
Yeah.
It happens all the time for our male counterparts. Somebody picks
Right.
you out of a crowd and says, I think you have leadership potential. Now let me help show you the way. And I think for me, it really my life experience has made me want to go back to my up and coming leaders, women leaders, and share, my wisdom, listen to their concerns, because what we know is what's happening with the younger generations are uniquely different than what they're afforded space and opportunity to think about things that our Gen Xers and baby boomers just really didn't have.
Right.
And so being a thought partner with them and helping them to understand that you can get to this place that we work really hard to get to in our 50s. Let's try to help you to get there in your 40s,
Right.
maybe even in your 30s. So I
Right.
think we get to bring that wisdom of lived experience, not only the things that went well, but where we messed up or could have done some things differently. We get to where appropriate, because we don't want to present ourselves as the we've arrived and therefore sit down and listen to what I say, but
Right.
more of a sharing of experience and wisdom that we get to support our up and coming women in leadership.
Okay. So if a woman listening feels like she's been carrying leadership responsibilities for years, but hasn't had the space to reflect on her own growth, where should she start?
I would say start by creating the space. Act like your life depends on it.
Okay.
When you think about how you love your friends, you love your family, your spouse, your parents, if they said, I needed something, you would stop what you were doing or do the best you could to stop what you were doing to show up for them. Show up for yourself in the same way.
Okay.
So I would say start there. Start with creating some space for yourself, like your life depends on it. And trust that with support,
Hmm.
you will find a way forward for yourself that feels more truer and authentic and healthy
Yeah.
for you to pursue.
So what is the first question she should ask herself before she can even create that space? What is something that she should be saying or asking herself that so she knows that that space is needed?
I will tell you, I trust the intuition of a woman. And I believe deeply, I mean, with all of me,
Hmm.
that being still, it will show itself to her.
Mm, so true. But we do have to truly
We,
sit and listen.
we have to sit and listen, because why? We know what we're pretending not to hear. We know it. We know it. We saying it to ourselves in the shower. you know, we know what we're pretending not to see, you know,
Right.
and we know what we're pretending not to say. I believe with every fiber of my being that we know. Now, sometimes you do need help. We don't invest in ourselves in the way that we invest in our children, that we invest in our families.
Right.
And here's what I would say to women who are at this point of like, I know something's not right. Invest in yourself, because sometimes you need help to ask that question. Sometimes you need help for somebody to expose what you're not willing to see. Invest in yourself. If you
Right.
can walk in your closet and you can look at a pair of shoes and a purse and a suit and count up how much it costs,
Girl.
think about investing that same amount into
Hmm.
yourself to get the support that you need so
Right.
that you can be a well organized and authentic version of yourself today, right now.
Right.
Mhm.
We don't understand the importance of investing on the inside
No,
like
we
we do
don't.
on the facade on the outside. So
Right.
if you could leave women navigating leadership in midlife with one piece of guidance, what would it be?
Mm. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. I remember, and I'll be brief. I remember when I had to confront the fact that I had lost trust in myself because I wasn't willing to do the hard thing that was best for me.
Mm,
And I remember having to earn it back with myself by making tiny decisions
mm,
about what I was no longer willing to do because it made somebody else feel comfortable.
that, that,
Mm-hmm.
that. That's how we,
Hmm.
that's the first way we lose ourselves
That's right.
is not investing and making, like you said, micro moves. It doesn't have to be huge moves,
No,
just
it doesn't.
something
That's
small,
right.
and it builds
That's
up. It'll eventually
that's right.
build up if you stay consistent. So,
That's right. That's right.
Danielle, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, and I knew it would be. Just being in some of the business coaching that I've been, able to be in with you and
Hmm.
watching you and just listening to you speak. You are an amazing leader, amazing, coach, and I appreciate you coming on, giving me your time in your busy schedule. So thank you again for coming on. And I definitely will, be in touch because I might look at you as my mentor in all this.
Oh, thank you. That means so much to me. It's been a joy sitting here talking. And as I was thinking about this conversation today, I've been so excited. So
Oh,
it's
good.
been my honor and privilege to be on this podcast with you
Well,
today.
thank you, thank you. So her information will be in the description below. So if there are any women leaders out there who know that something needs to shift, or you're seeing something yourself shifting, and you know something needs to change, and you are in leadership, go ahead and her information will be in the description below. So thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you guys again real soon. Bye.
Bye.
If something in today's conversation spoke to where you are right now, I'd love to support you through my one on one coaching or invite you into our live monthly conversations. All of the links are in the description below.